on the setting up of this new effort to coordinate communications across California. We'll talk more about that and how you can get involved, but I want to let Jasmine introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Jasmine Kaddoura. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the Senior Program Coordinator at the California Access to Justice Commission. And I am partnering with Sam on this effort of California Voices.
Thanks, Jasmine. And as you may have noticed, we'll be recording this session, so folks who are joining a little late can catch up later if they wish. I hope that's all right with you, but we've just started recording, so thanks everyone for your flexibility. So I'm going to start sharing my screen so that we can kick off this training. This is Strategic Communications Part 1. I'll explain more about the Part 2 in a moment, but we're going to talk today about client advocacy in the court of public opinion. And what I mean by that is, we all use I'm having trouble changing slides. We all use strategic communications in our work. And I'm going to introduce some concepts and approaches to advocacy that involve actors outside the courtroom and how it relates to your work in the courtroom, and try to show you and convince you that actually strategic communications is something that we do every day, no matter the kind of work that we do. And then Jasmine is going to talk about how we'll be putting those skills and those approaches to use through California Voices for Civil Justice. So for today's agenda, Part 1 on today's agenda will be what is strategic communications.
Wait until these cars move.
And Thanks, Jasmine. Sorry for the technical difficulties there. Why should you care about what strategic communications is, and why should you try to think about it in your day-to-day work? And we'll talk about audiences, because the first rule of communications is know your audience, and then trying to tie it into some of the principles of plain language writing in the legal profession, and how that relates to values-based messaging and audience-directed messaging. And then finally, as I mentioned, Jasmine will share more about this new effort, California Voices, and how you can get involved. There will be a Part 2 to this training. We're realizing that there's a lot to introduce this session, and I want to give folks the opportunity to delve more into the practical how-to of communications and how to get your message out. More hands-on exercises to develop messages and developing and pitching stories. So more of that on the ground, rubber meets road kind of counterpart to today's introduction, more high-level concept building and definitions, really. So I'll jump right in. First of all, Jasmine's going to open up an audience poll because we want to know who we have on the line. As I just said, know your audience. So let us know what your professional background is using these options that we've just given you.
I'll give it a few more seconds to let more people vote.
Getting some great data here.
Okay.
Great. So we have a really great mix of backgrounds here. A lot of communication staff. 20% of the folks on the line are in communication. So that's a really good percent, I think. We want there to be a lot of folks who are actually practicing in the direct service realm, learning about strategic communications, because chances are those comms folks are already thinking about it this way. And through the Voices California effort, we want to be introducing people who have direct subject matter experience with legal issues and can use that direct subject matter experience to connect reporters and other sources of information to those facts, to those stories that they need to be able to get the message out about civil justice in California and the legal needs of folks in California. So this is wonderful. Thank you all for participating in that. I'm going to close this window so it's not in the middle of mine. So what is strategic communications and why should you care about it? The definition that I'm going to use today is Strategic communications is delivering carefully crafted messages using messengers who are credible to a deliberately chosen target audience to bring about a desired objective. The ordering of that and the emphasis of that is actually wrong. I would say the objective comes first, but I wanted to make it a little more legible in plain language for you all. But what I want to emphasize is that the objective is what you're all working toward, whether it's improving a client's housing situation or whether it's helping a client achieve a benefits result that they appeal result that they deserve. There's some objective that you're working toward. Maybe that objective is to convince someone of something. And in most cases, you'll have to convince some audience that has the power to make that a reality. So I'm going to talk about each of these components, objective, audience, messengers, and messages in a second. But what I want to drive home off the top is that we are all strategic communicators. It's not just for the PR flacks of the world. It's not just for your communications directors. And really, everyone should be thinking about what objective are they looking to achieve, and who can make that a reality, and how can we move them from where they are now to where we need to get them. So whether you practice family law or housing law, or you're working on disability rights or some other field, one thing connects you all, which is that each of your clients has a civil legal problem or problems that you can help fix, that there's a civil legal remedy to. And your objective is to improve the lives of your clients by solving their civil legal problem. I'm speaking right now, of course, to the staff attorneys, the managing attorneys. Of course, if we're on the communication side, we may have a different objective of raising the profile of our organization among funders, for instance. That's a different objective and requires different audiences. But speaking to the legal practitioners in the room now, your objective is to cause a positive legal result for your clients. And in order to get that result, oftentimes, but not always, there's a judge deciding on that client's case. Very simplistic example, not all cases go to the courtroom, and not all cases need to go into a courtroom. But in this case that it does, there's some judge, that's the audience. And there's some message that needs to be delivered to that judge to convince him or her that the argument you're making is correct, and get them on your side. And that really is all done through, in this case, a courtroom. That's the medium of this all. So we have an objective, we have an audience, we have a message, and we have a medium, a channel of information through which all of this is happening. And in that medium, there's certain tactics that you're allowed to take and certain tactics that you can't take to affect that result. And so thinking about this structurally, from objective down to the tactics that you use to deliver a message that's persuasive to an audience, I want you to think about where you use strategic communications in your day-to-day life. I haven't given you everything about what strategic communications is, or even some examples, but I want you to think about it and answer in the chat. This could be a personal or a professional example. Again, the question is thinking about when you're thinking about your audience, when you have to achieve some result, and you have to figure out what to say to that person to get them on your side, what's an example of strategic communications? So I see from Catherine, letters to the legislature on pending legislation, absolutely. Everywhere. Thank you, Stacy, for making my point for me. Briefs on Twitter, in legal briefs submitted to the court, right? Press release on filed litigation. So we're trying to, who's our audience in a press release? Our audience is the media. Our audience is media gatekeepers like editors, reporters, that they deem our story newsworthy and print it or publish it on the internet. Preparation to meet with a congressional staff member. Absolutely. I mean, there's the audience is the staff member, but the ultimate audience is the member of Congress or the member of the legislature. So convincing that audience, that first audience, the staff member, that you have something worthy to say and that they should pass it on to their boss. That's an example of strategic communications. Getting my kids to do their homework. Jenny, I love that example because it is, again, making the point that strategic communications exists everywhere. So what does your audience value? How do you entice them or incentivize them to do something they don't want to do? That's strategic communications. Okay, so we have a lot of really good examples here, and I encourage you all to come up with them. And if it comes to you throughout this session, please put them in the chat. But movement building by connecting our audience on social media with broad themes of social justice, e.g. National Day of Racial Healing. I read that one out because it's a full strategy right there. That's not just an example, but we have an objective, movement building. How are we going to do that? We have to reach an audience that needs to be defined, but on social media, that's the medium through which we are going to be communicating with them. So thank you all for your really interesting and relatable examples here. So I want to just now go through what I see as the elements of strategic communication, which is not a mystery to you, as I've been kind of harping on these terms throughout this entire presentation. But we have an objective that can be achieved by an audience, and the audience needs to hear a certain message, but it has to come from the right messenger, and it has to be in the right medium where it reaches the audience. And tactics can be used, certain tactics can be used to get that message on that medium. So the objective, what are you trying to achieve? What outcome are you aiming for? It's always in any campaign or any effort to achieve a result, we need to have a specific notion of what success looks like. And that could be something as simple as a 5% increase, or not simple, but as short as a 5% increase in funding for some service, or it could be as complex as a very complex benefits case that relates to an eviction. So there's a lot of different outcomes, but being clear on what that outcome is helps you determine who can help you achieve it. So who can make your objective a reality is the question that leads us to our audience, the people we should be talking to, or the person we should be talking to. Do they need to be persuaded, or do they need to be simply motivated because they're already on our side but they somehow haven't taken the action we were hoping for? And so there's analysis to be done on who our audience is that helps us determine what the message should be. What does your audience need to hear to take the action that you have in mind for them to take, or the thing that will make your objective a reality? And knowing the message, we also have to know who should be delivering that message. Who will your audience believe? You may have heard the term, the messenger is the message. And so these two terms, messenger and message, could be kind of hand in hand at this point. But the wrong messenger delivering the right message is as bad as the right messenger delivering the wrong message, if that makes sense. And getting down to how are we actually going to deliver that message to that audience? Well, if we don't know how they get their information, or we're just guessing, we're not necessarily going to be reaching them. So having thought about and researched how are we going to get this information to that audience, then we can determine what channels of information will actually reach the audience. How are you going to get their attention? And it's all about getting people's attention and moving them to action. That's what strategic communications is really all about. You're constrained by, right now in today's media market, there are so many channels of communication, so many channels of information, and they're also fragmented into micro-targeted audiences, and it's difficult to know how to get a message out. So thinking about it structurally, some examples of mediums, ways of getting information to people are top line, really earned media, digital media, paid media, grassroots advocacy. This is not exhaustive, but what I mean by earned media is, when I said before, what's the audience in a press release? It's the media, it's the gatekeepers. Earned media means someone has determined that this is of news value enough that they should publish it for their audience. So you've earned that story. And that can be in a print or online outlet, or it can be in a visual or an audio medium like a podcast or radio, or on television or YouTube. That can be, and when I say YouTube, I know that might sound like digital, but there's news outlets that exist on YouTube, which I would still lump in under earned media because you have to go through a gatekeeper. Whereas with digital media, there's a lot more ownership and control. So social media, if you own the channel, that's your way of getting information out to your followers. And if your followers are the ones you need to be reaching, then that's the channel you should be using. There's blog posts, there's newsletters. Those are owned channels of digital media. Whereas there's paid media, which is where you don't control, you don't have the immediate control to get the content out there, but you can pay someone to do it. So digital ads will get your message out to a wider audience, but you pay for the privilege of getting their attention. Whereas traditional media ads are very similar. Billboards also, it seems quaint, but I think billboards are having a renaissance. So don't ignore the billboards. And grassroots advocacy as a method for reaching decision makers. This is where there's petitions or organizing actions taken to gain the attention of decision makers. Okay, back to strategic communications definitions, tactics. This is the last component, but it's often the most tempting to jump to first. We want to think about, oh, we should make a video about this, or oh, we should have a tweet storm about this. But unless we know what media we need to reach our audience on and what messages we're using to reach that audience, we're just taking a guess that that's the right tactic. So what specific actions will you take to deliver that message to an audience through a given medium, and will it be effective? And so if your audience reads the New York Times, then your tactic may well, it should well be a pitch to a New York Times reporter or developing relationships with a New York Times reporter. But if social media is where your audience gets their information, that's going to look different. The tactic could be a digital ad, or it could be a tweet storm, or it could be just a tweet. So thinking about tactics last allows us to make the best use of our limited resources, which is an important thing for all of us to think about. Is not every one of our organizations has a communications person on staff. We have a lot more people here who aren't doing communications on a day-to-day basis, but you might be able to make some significant impact using it if you can use it in a targeted manner, strategically, and without too much burden on your time. And I want to dive into earned media, or everything that's fit to print or air, because that's the first tool that we'll be focusing on through this California Voices for Civil Justice effort to influence the narrative around civil justice in California. Print and online, as I mentioned, is one of the media that you could search for coverage on, and the way to get that is building relationships with reporters, which we'll talk about more in further trainings. And the sort of archetype example of that is a news story pitch, pitching a reporter and saying, hey, this is a news story, this is newsworthy, cover it, please. An op-ed, which is written by someone outside of the newspaper and published in the newspaper as an opinion, and an editorial, which is the opinion of the outlet itself. On TV side, you can always do a TV news segment pitch. There's feature stories and there's opinion segments. I just wanted you to get a sense of what the individual tactics can look like on the earned media side. So I'm gonna just throw this up one more time just to drive home that strategic communications is about bringing about a desired objective through a deliberately chosen target audience, using credible messengers that are delivering carefully crafted messages. I apologize. And so moving quickly along in recognition of our time limits, just wanted you to see that again. The first thing we think about is, who is our target audience? Who has the power to get you the outcome that you want? And so as I alluded to before, there's many different target audiences that we could have in mind. This is, again, not an exhaustive list of the people that exist in the world, but clients are an audience for us sometimes. Oftentimes judges are an audience for us when we're when we're litigating a client's case, or landlords perhaps who need information on how to apply for rental assistance for their tenants. That could be something that you choose to focus on for communications. And again, clients might be delivering information about a newly available service, trying to reach them to encourage the use of that service, or to tell them how to, once again, encourage their landlords to apply for rental assistance, thinking of just recent examples that have come up. And then you may have audiences, as I mentioned before, when someone brought up the preparing to meet with a staff member for a member of the legislature. Well, you may have an audience who needs to also be a messenger, and to recruit a messenger, they need to be persuaded and motivated to be your messenger, to be an advocate for you. And so it may be that we determine the best way to reach our client is through people in their community. So maybe that's educators, or it's faith leaders, or it's businesses. There's a manifold variety of combinations of thinking about your audience as a messenger and as an audience, and each one of those audiences we're trying to get a result from them, or get some outcome from them. And so bringing this down to kind of the day-to-day work of the legal services attorney, who has heard a lot about what's the importance of plain language and the importance of using plain language, and a lot of talk about using plain language in legal forms, but plain language writing is actually very much at the heart of strategic communications. The first rule of plain language is write for your audience. This is not from this is not from my brain. This comes from government guidance on using plain language, and it's always encouraged for us to I'm sorry, Dahlia, I accidentally asked you to unmute. I was trying to move the box down at the bottom of the screen. It's always encouraged to use plain language that reaches your audience. But what does that really mean? And in the context of strategic communications, what does that mean? And I'm obviously a fan of definitions, so I wanted to look up what the definition of plain is, and I thought it was interesting to just take a moment on this. The first definition is fine, not decorated or elaborate, simple or ordinary. But that's not really what we're talking about. We don't mean we're trying to dumb down our communications to a certain level. The second definition is, having no pretense, and it's simple. So again, I'd say that's closer to the mark, but we're not trying to just simply write at a 6th grade level all the time. That's not exactly what we're talking about here. But I like the third definition the most, which is easy to perceive or understand, clear. And really, if you go down, it just gets better. It's obvious, clear, crystal clear, understandable, comprehensible. And so that, if we're talking about different audiences, plain language means a different thing in a different context. And so when we're speaking to judges, plain language is one thing. When we're speaking to opposing counsel, plain language is another thing. Clients, it's another thing. So our goal always in our communications and in our work that involves communicating to others is to be comprehensible, to be clear, to be coherent and accessible to that audience. And so from a piece of reading that I found particularly instructive on this, that we're going to distribute after the session, the questions to ask yourself when you're really diving into knowing your audience are as follows. Are these ones on the right? Well, of course, who are they? But then once we know who they are, what do they already know about this subject? What do they need to know? What questions are they likely to have? And then this one, which really is a great kind of segue over to the next question, which is what is messaging, is what's the best outcome for my client and what do I need to say? And what's the best outcome for my audience and what do I need to say? And so thinking about if your audience has the power to create the outcome for your client, those are really one and the same question. What do I need to say to the audience to get this outcome? And again, this will be distributed after the session along with the slides, so don't feel the need to furiously copy down any notes here if any of you were. And so the next question naturally is what is the message? It's, what does the audience need to hear to get to that desired outcome? Earlier, I said that tactics are how we get the audience's attention, but once we have their attention, how do we change their mind? Or if they're already persuaded of this, of our side, how do we motivate them to help us? And so I present to you a tool that you can use in everything from your talking point documents if you're on the communication staff, or to just to a fundraising appeal, or to how you communicate with your clients. The tool is called VPSA. It's a message building template based on the acronym for value, problem, solution, and action. And this is in that order. It's designed to be a values-based message, which is to say we're trying to tap into what our audience cares about. So it doesn't mention audience here, but what resonates with your audience is the value that we want to be evoking. Then there's some problem that's standing in the way or undermining that value. What is it? And then there's some solution that we want to achieve, which is the solution to that problem. But we can't reach that solution without an action from our audience. So what must the audience do to solve the problem that's threatening the value? And so what is values-based messaging? What is a shared value? Well, in thinking about shared values, it's important to differentiate them from other things like issues or like policies. When we talk about shared values, we're talking about broadly held beliefs about how society should function. Things like fairness, everyone deserves a fair chance, or opportunity. What we want is equality of opportunity, and equality is another value. There are other values that we could be evoking, but these are examples of what they are. And here's some examples of what shared values are not. So issues, eviction, domestic violence, unemployment benefits, debt collection. These are just a few examples, but when we want to engage with our audience's emotions, make them more likely to listen to what we want to say, we should be starting with values and not with problems. We should be starting with what they believe as a sort of highly held belief or deeply held belief. Eviction may be a problem that threatens the value that everyone should have a safe home to live in, but it's not it's not the strongest thing you should lead with. And then neither is policies. So the policies that we use to address those issues, we don't necessarily want to lead with that. That's not our strongest foot to lead with. So rental assistance programs or right to counsel, however laudable these policies may be, if we're trying to, again, engage with our audience's emotions and their values to make them receptive to our arguments and our messaging, then starting with policies puts them in a frame of mind that we don't want them to be in, which is not a values-based frame. So I want to take a few minutes and throw an exercise your way, which is to come up with your own message based on whatever comes to mind when you hear something like everyone deserves blank, but blank stands in the way. And we can fix that by blank. And that's why you need to do something blank. Okay, so all of this assumes you have a particular audience in mind. And it doesn't matter who that audience is, but you need to be cognizant of that, because you don't know what they can do in the action step if you don't know who they are. So think about that, and then we'll take 3 minutes, maybe 4. When you're done, share it in the chat if you're willing to, or we could also take people reading out their messages if you'd like to raise your hand. So either put it in the chat or raise your hand, and then we'll talk about a few of them and who the audiences were and dig in. So take 3 minutes and we'll come back to that, to this soon. Thanks to those who've submitted their messages. That's great. We'll give folks another minute or two until 3:35, just because it's you know, not the easiest thing. So let's give folks another minute or two to craft some messages. And why don't we also, even if you've already submitted a message on the chat, then that's great. But I'd like to encourage people to unmute to share their messages if they're willing to do that. Okay, thanks everyone. Keep throwing your ideas in the chat, but can I get a volunteer to share their message by reading it?
I'll go ahead, Sam, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Please go. I can't see who it is because I've got my screen shared, but go ahead, please.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Margaret. I'm the communications manager over at Inland County's Legal Services. And I said, justice serves us all, but oftentimes a person's legal representation depends on what they can afford. That's why Inland County's Legal Services has strived to provide high quality legal aid at no cost to our neighbors in Riverside and San Bernardino counties for more than 60 years. You can help us on our mission of closing the justice gap by donating to ICLS.
Thank you so much, Margaret. And what I loved about that one is that it's not your typical advocacy message. That's a fundraising message. And so again, to anyone who thinks this is just, you know, about getting stories in the newspaper, this is a great example that we use strategic communications in fundraising as well. The audience, you know, the message we're tapping into there is justice serves us all, or that, you know, there should be justice for all, or fairness. We're really tapping into those really basic messages about why justice matters, and quickly pivoting to, but you know, but wealth and a person's ability to pay for legal representation or services determines the outcomes they get. Margaret, you said this so much better than me, but you already read it, so I don't want to say it again. So you can help us though, you can help us continue this mission, which is to bring justice to more people who can't afford it through free services. You can help us by donating. I love that. It's a really direct, powerful message. Who did you, just out of curiosity, who did you have in mind as the audience for that?
I guess I would just say probably our donors. You know, we recently just brought on a development director, so we're kind of starting from the ground with our fundraising, you know, so we're just trying to reach kind of, I guess, new donors, you know, to build up this program. Yeah, so, you know, I guess we've been kind of moving in broad strokes, but I love how different everyone's message is just from this simple, you know, little template. It's great how kind of versatile, you know, the setup is.
I was just remarking on that in my head as well. Thank you for saying that, because we have from Teddy a really high level message about access to justice, and relating to relating to a specific budget increase. Not everyone can deliver that message, but that's a great example of one of those really direct public affairs messages. Annie has a great one here about everyone in prison deserving equal access to healing and justice, but that what's standing in the way of that is a discretionary parole process that is not serving people as it should. And we can fix this by dismantling that system, creating more meaningful healing opportunities for people. And so this is more of a fundraising ask, but that easily could have been used in an advocacy context as well. That's why you should support Uncommon Law's work with a donation today. Great, thank you, Annie. Is there anyone else who wants to share out? And I'm sorry if I stole your thunder, Annie, but is there anyone else who wants to share out their own message on the line? And as you think, just again, more examples of the versatility of this model, but everyone deserves safe, affordable housing. I think that's a great example of a value well stated. And what's standing in the way of that is not everyone can get safe, affordable housing because of rising housing costs. And we can fix that by protecting the affordable homes in our community. That's why you need to support the right to counsel for anyone at risk of losing their home. Thank you, Angela. And I encourage, we'll be sharing the recording and the meeting, the meeting notes from this. I think there's a way to do that, save these notes. I'd love to just share this as a text document and people can refer back to it for inspiration, because I think there's a lot of inspiration that we can find here. All right, well, I will move on, but that was a really great exercise and I'm so glad it produced the diversity of issues and of approaches, both on the advocacy side and on the fundraising side. So I want to make a final point that isn't really, doesn't fall into the definition of what strategic communications is. We've done that already, we've hammered that home. But I want to talk about the way that we go about telling, or delivering messages and the content of those messages. And you can see the point here, but stories win hearts and data wins minds, or data win minds. I'm not going to get any flack for whether it's plural or singular, but stories win hearts, data wins minds. We need to craft a narrative, and we need both to be able to craft a narrative that achieves our broad goal, which is to convince California leaders the value of civil legal resources to their constituents, as well as convince the public of the value of these services to their lives and the availability when those services are available. And so stories, these are the human stories that you all have access to, and that especially the staff attorneys, the managing attorneys, and the communications directors who are reading those stories. This person experienced this problem that affected them critically, and we were able to help them solve that problem. Or this person experienced a problem and we weren't able to help them because something needs to change. That's a story, and that's a person's anecdote. A lot of times people dismiss anecdotes as being not, well, they're not, the plural of anecdote isn't data. That's what we're talking about here is not peer-reviewed research that needs to go in a journal. We're talking about how we change hearts and minds. And so we need both. Stories get at the heartstrings of people. They pull at people's heartstrings. They are what connects them, especially if we've done, thoughtful values-based messaging. That's what connects them emotionally to the issue. Data convinces them that this is, that you're right, or that it drives home the need to take a certain action. But we shouldn't dismiss either one of them in the effort to build a narrative. And so I want to just give kind of as a brief preview to what Jasmine is going to talk about next. Through the California Voices effort, I hope that we will be able to develop a process and a system for finding stories that can help us build statewide or regional stories that we can, narratives that we can push through the media, through social media, through earned media, and because finding stories is part of the process of communications. And so in a general context, this is adapted from what you can do generally at your organization, but I wanted to adapt it to a network-wide approach to building a story bank, or building a base of stories that we can share with reporters. The first step is with you. It's with member organizations that they filter, high quality stories. What I mean by that is stories with emotional heft, stories that show that show, very clearly a problem and why something needs to change. All stories have value, but when we think about what a reporter is looking for, oftentimes it's impact, it's a particular scope of a problem, a particular scale of harm. So filter stories that they deem newsworthy to both, the reporters that they're in contact with, but also to the California Voices Network through some decision maker who decides this is good, we should share it with California Voices. We maintain a story bank built from those network submissions. And that allows us to connect reporters who may not be in your area, you may not have reporter relationships with. It allows us to connect those reporters with you and with other organizations that have similar stories, because as is often the case, reporters are looking for more than one example. They want to see, three, the rule of three, golden rule of three. You get three examples, that's a trend, then you get reporters interested in it. That's not always true. I'd be happy to be rebutted on that point, but I think that's really kind of at the base of why we're trying to build a story bank. It's that we can show reporters, this is a trend, it's happening here, it's happening here, it's happening there. And in order to actually get those stories available to media, to us to craft into content to share with the network, you need to be able to ask your clients about their willingness to go public with their story. And we're going to have more trainings, more discussions on how to do that ethically, and how to ethically advise clients of the risk and the upside and the downside risk for these opportunities. Not that there is none. There's definitely some risk in taking a story public, and the opportunities to do that on the record with their full name attached versus doing it on background with a pseudonym. And so then you can also use the Justice Voices California list to find additional stories. This is what we hope you all will do as frequently as you're looking for that rule of three. If you have a story that you want to find other examples of from different parts of the state, use the Justice Voices California list, of which you are now a part. You'll start seeing emails from us on that list soon. To find additional stories, you'll be able to email out. It'll go to everyone on the list, and it'll help us build both an awareness of what's happening, in a certain subject matter, but also what reporters are interested in and the stories that are available to share with those reporters. And with that, I'd love to invite folks, as Jasmine has done, to come off mute or put in chat any questions on what that was on that high speed overview. And you can also wait till the end after Jasmine has given sort of an update and has shared more about what you can do to get involved with California Voices. Okay, I want to make sure we do have time for that, so I'm going to pass it over to Jasmine to give a introduction or more about this. Jasmine, take it away.
Okay, great. So before I start talking about California Voices, first we just wanted to do another quick little audience poll to learn about your experience with the media. So there's 4 options. None, I've never done an interview with a reporter before. A little, I've never done an interview with a reporter before, but I've worked with one in some capacity. Some, I've done a small number of interviews, or the last one is experienced. I've done a large number of interviews. I'll just give it another minute for folks to respond. Okay. Okay, so we can see from your responses that actually quite a few of you have done interviews before, have done a small number of interviews. And I guess small is probably relative. Maybe some people think small is 2 and other people think small is 15. But I think that that's a great place. That's great for us to know, because we can definitely shape our future trainings around, understanding that most of our audience has some experience with media. So now I'm just going to talk a little bit about California Voices. So the goal of California Voices is essentially to elevate the voice of civil legal aid in the media. And we want to be a hub of collaboration for legal aid organizations, for us to increase the effectiveness of our strategic communications. And so we are going to do that in a few different ways. If you can advance this slide, Sam. So just like this training, we're going to continue to offer more trainings. The part 2 of this training is going to be on March 9th, and we're going to send a follow-up email with the link to that. We're also going to be coordinating some one-on-one skills building sessions and some small group skills building sessions. We're also always going to be available for you to come to us if you have media requests that are incoming and you need help responding, or if you have a story that you think you really would like to get out into the media and you need help just crafting that message and reaching out to reporters, or you don't know who to reach out to, you can come to Voices and we'll help with that. The Voices listserv, which you're all going to be a part of now, is going to be one way for us to collaborate as a community. So you're not only going to be, coming to Sam and I, but also working all together. So if you have a media request incoming that you just don't have the capacity for at your organization, one way to use Justice Voices California, the listserv, is that you can forward it to the listserv and see if anyone else has the capacity for that. Another way, as I mentioned, is if you want to speak with a reporter and maybe you're feeling nervous about that, we're going to have one-on-one interview prep sessions. And so we're going to be sending out a link to these Calendly, to our Calendly, so that you can book those in the future. We're probably going to have a few of them available per month. But another way that we're excited about is having small group discussions. So being able to communicate with one another. So there's a few people on this call who have done a large number of interviews, and we're hoping maybe we'll have a diverse group of folks in there, people who have no experience and people that have a lot of experience, to talk with one another about communication strategies and how to talk to the news. And so that's another way. And then one of the last ways that you can get involved with California Voices is we're creating some small groups around some issue-specific topics. So one of them is we're organizing a group of organizations that work with communities impacted by incarceration, because we understand that those organizations may have more unique communications needs. And another way, another group that we're creating through Slack is a digital media strategy and coordination group. And so that's going to be for anyone in the office that works on social media, digital media, and because they don't, those are not always the people that are also working with the earned media. And so those are just two of our small groups so far, but we're also open to more if anyone else has any ideas, or if anyone is interested in joining either of those two groups that I just mentioned, email or chat us right now and we can add you to those groups.
And I'll just jump in, Jasmine, just to say on that first one, messaging and narrative strategy is another group that we want to form. Some of you, not all of you, but some of you have very strong opinions about what our overall narrative strategy and messaging can be. And for those who want to have input on that, we want to create that. That's not necessarily going to be a Slack group or anything. Sorry, my dog is growling. It's not necessarily going to be a Slack group, but we will create it to give opportunities for input. Go ahead, Jasmine.
Well, I think we could go to the next slide. So we will be sending out emails about our future trainings. You're going to get an email following this session with your MCLE certificates and the link to the next training. And you will see on the Justice Voices listserv more trainings, you can also go to our website, cavoices.org, and go to our trainings page, and we'll be listing everything there. So keep an eye out. You'll get it. You'll start receiving emails from us. Don't unsubscribe. And now we're opening it up for questions. Either about what Sam was talking about, the communication strategies, or any general questions about California Voices.
Thanks so much, Jasmine. Yep. Love to hear questions about either one.
And thank you to everyone.
Thanks, Charity.
I'm getting a few messages about folks who want to join the different small groups. So I am making a note of all of those, and we'll add all of you. Thanks. So if we don't have any questions, I think we can end a little bit early. Right.
That sounds great. Thank you so much, Jasmine. Thank you to everyone for participating. We look forward to the next session on March 9th, and to hearing from you in the interim about whether you'd like to get involved in any of these small groups and training sessions and the like. So thanks to everyone, and look forward to working with you.